a sense of community when you're free. Rolling through the mountains, rolling through the valley, rolling through paradise with me.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. Well, my guest today has lived in different countries and done different things throughout his life. He's gone from England to Canada to the U.S., back to Canada. And then there's this whole career. Ladies and gentlemen, time to meet Peter Hitchcock. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much. Looking forward to
it. So I know that when you were in England, that's where you were born, right?
That's right, yes.
And you got into acting at the age of 10?
That's right. Yeah. I used to stutter. I think I still am stuttering, but I went to a stage school where they taught you how to act and do various things, right. And they would send us out to various films. So my first film was Esther Costello with Joan Crawford, just as an extra.
Oh, wow.
In this big studio in Shepperton. And then they sent me on to other ones, Horrors of the Black Museum and TV shows like Wacko, which probably people don't remember, with Jimmy Edwards. And so I became, somewhat experienced with this. I'm going back in time, right? I did and worked on a film for BBC for Aladdin. So I wasn't really great at school. I got moved from a private school to the regular school, and it was just hard to adjust. And so at 15, I left school, and I went to the Labour Exchange, and I asked the guy there, well, how do I get a job? Where do I start? And he said, well, you've got to get into the film union. Well, I said I wanted to be a filmmaker, and you get into film union. And he said, well, to start, you should be a projectionist. Okay. And so I went and got a job as a cinema projectionist in Kingston upon Thames in England. And then one day the usherette said to me, there's a job going at this film studio called AP Films. And they used to do these puppet shows called Thunderbirds and Stingray and Fireball XL5. Here's one of the places, I don't know what you can see. Oh, it's not focusing too well on me, is it?
Blurry, yeah, it's all blurry.
Oh, forget that one. I'll send you a pictures. But Thunderbirds, and so I got a job as a projectionist in there doing front projection and rear projection. And then one day a lip sync operator got sick, and I had to learn very quickly how to operate the puppets' mouths through a tape recorder that worked with solenoid and sort of would move the signal backwards and forwards on it. And so I'd have to figure out how to do that. And I was an assistant director at the same time, and continuity, and I helped build the sets and everything. And then one day they said, oh, we're behind times. Can you go and work on special effects? And I ended up working in special effects with a guy called Derek Meddings, who was really a famous director, went on to many major films like Superman and things like that. Right. And so I decided to come to Canada when I was 21. My uncle was a doctor out in Saskatchewan, in Biggar, Saskatchewan. Okay. And he paid for my trip one way. And so I came over and I arrived in Toronto, and I decided to just walk around and see. I didn't know anybody.
Yeah. Right.
I started at one bar on Yonge Street because I was really thirsty. I asked for lemonade and lime, and this guy at the bar said, why don't you try a Canadian beer? So I had one beer, and he said, wait till the girls come out. And then it turned out that this was showgirls, right? I didn't know quite what to do. I was just a young guy, and I hadn't seen things like this. And then I went to another pub called the Friars, and they were body painting. And so I ended up walking up the street, and I ended up drunk on Yorkville on my first night. And I walked into this coffee bar, and there was a lady there, and she was from England, and she said, well, come back tomorrow morning, and I'll show you where to get a room for rent. And I rented a room for $10 a night, and then within 3 weeks, I was working at the Canadian Broadcasting in editing. And so that was how it all began. But my main story was like I arrived at Yorkville, and Yorkville was like a central hippie place with lots and lots of music, Joni Mitchell, all those kinds of people. And I've still lived near Yorkville. I love Yorkville, but I like the old Yorkville much better. You know.
Yeah, yeah. And now, is this in England or in Canada? No, in England. You ran 2 folk clubs, right?
Yeah, that's right. And with your name like Nancy Guitar, I thought I'd mention that, right?
I'm not musical.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm not musical. I just have a musical name.
I used to go to folk clubs, and I used to see all these great folk musicians. So when I went to work on Thunderbirds and Stingray, I took over a folk club in Windsor, and I started another one in Maidenhead in Berkshire, and I booked people like Paul Simon for £20.
Oh, wow.
We all sat, and he just entertained us all night. You know, it was just fantastic, right? You know, and there's other people that people might know of over here. That, you know, John Remble and Bert Jansch. So I wasn't making any money. I was just having fun, and I would get up and host it, and I would play a song or two. Okay. And I wasn't very good, but I did that. And then I had a stables that I converted into a coffee bar, and so I had that as well to run. But everything was going downhill for me. The coffee bar was raided by the police, and so it was obviously the right time to suddenly come to Canada. But you know, because of all the folk music that I loved and everything, Yorkville was the perfect place for me to land in, and that's the story so far.
So, but what took you to the U.S.?
We lived on Yonge Street on a little apartment. We had no money virtually. There was like a recession, and all of a sudden we had twins. And I managed to get a job with a guy I had worked for before in Ottawa, and we basically moved to Ottawa, and I worked for films there, and made films for the National Film Board and the Armed Forces, and I went over to the Middle East, you know, after the 6-Day War, and went into Israel, Egypt, and Cyprus and places like that, and I was doing quite well, making these kinds of, you know, promotional films for the government and things like that. And I got kind of bored, and I was talking to a guy who was going to go down there and get married. He was a French translator, and he said, he mentioned Hollywood, and I started thinking, well, Hollywood sounds really nice. And at the time, we were living in a rented farmhouse with chickens and things like that. Okay. And there was an oil crisis, and there was a recent documentary on about the oil crisis and how bad it was getting. And we became quite fearful about our supply, right? You know, yeah. So we thought that would be another good reason to move. And I drove the car down and all the way to LA, and my wife and kids flew down, and we had 22 boxes, and we moved in. And I went for a job interview, and I got it. I worked for Wes Craven, who did The Hills of Eyes, which is a horror picture. I don't like horror pictures, by the way, but it was great fun doing all the sound effects to all the people getting hit and things like that.
Right.
And then I went on to work on other films. One was with Tippi Hedren, called Roar, and it was a Jan de Bont, who is another director now, was also the cameraman, and so we were all working in this big room with all these different editors, and I was just one of them, you know. Yeah. And we decided to come back to Canada, and my wife's a graphic designer, and she was doing movies with what's that movie called? John Travolta's Grease. So she did the end titles for that, and she was doing record covers and things like that. So we were kind of like coming along a little bit, you know. Yeah. But we kind of got homesick, and so we came back, and I managed to get work right away. And we lived in a little coach house, and then eventually bought a house and so forth, and things just got better and better. So it was a nice escape for a while, but coming back to Toronto where the real work was, and that was just great.
Now, but all this time, for a long time, you wanted to be a director. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, I always sort of fancied myself as a director, and my first film when I got to Yorkville was with hang on a sec. Sorry, brain slips.
Listen, I have them all the time.
Yeah, but it was a short film, and I got it onto CBC.
Right.
Yeah, and so it was a start, right? But after CBC, I went on to work for other companies as well. I worked for TV Ontario as a producer director. I worked on for CTV as a thrill of a lifetime, it was called.
Okay.
Where people would write in, they would want to have their thrills. So I went out to Calgary, and a guy wanted to ride a buffalo. And I learned you have to get off within 12 seconds, otherwise you're dead, right? So
yeah.
it was that kind of thing,
So, but you wanted to make a movie, right? As you said, which was set in Toronto. And I'm just trying to look at. I'm reading some of your what you sent to me, which is really great. It helps a lot, I'm sort of lost, so I'm sort of lost to where I am here. So you did produce your little movie, your short film.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that was Procol Harum. Had written a piece of music, and I really liked it. I invited them back to my flat. They were here in Toronto.
Okay.
And so anyway, it ended up with the Procol Harum music. So
right, yeah. So you were able to develop characters. Okay, so that film you directed yourself?
Yes, I directed it myself. Yeah.
So what's it like getting that produced?
Well, it was just a very low budget 5-minute film.
Okay.
And it was a girl coming off the aircraft. So I went actually out to the airport, and we had this girl coming off the aircraft and meeting her lover. And it was just walking around the park and things like that, very simple, right,
Yeah.
But it was a start, just to try to get, it's great it was on CBC too,
Right, yeah, you're right, yeah. So where are you now? What's happening in your life at this point?
I've just, 2 or 3 years ago, I finished making this feature film called A Song for Us. And it's about Yorkville in the 60s. And it's what happens when you meet your long lost lover. And that was the kind of idea I had when I was writing it. And we sort of spent 2 or 3 years going through ideas and things like that about how to write it and stuff like that. And I worked with actors, and I was trying out different scenes. And my wife said, well, we've got the money, why don't we spend it? We'll go and invest in it. And so we did. We started casting for it, and we did it all in our house. Just this low budget feature making, And I was able to get a musician who was called the Kensington Market. And he actually wrote a lot of the music as well. And so the idea was, we walk into the penny farthing, just like it happened to me when I walked into Yorkville. But this time, this is the going back into time. This is a young folk singer from England coming in to get work and live in Toronto. And so I took the whole thing in 2 time periods, which is kind of crazy. It's really complicated, right?
Yes.
And we had to, a fairly large cast of about 20 people. And because it was a 2 time periods, and we shot it on mainly in different locations in Toronto, where I sort of reproduced the 60s, and then present day, where this lady who'd now grown up, the folk singer. She was now living on the island in a nice cottage that we actually were very lucky to find, and all of a sudden, her daughter's a filmmaker, and she films this guy playing in an alley, and he's all down and out and everything, and she shows it to her mother, who's a kind of an artist, a painter and things like that, and she recognized him as a long lost lover. So she has to go and find him, and so she brings him back, and that's basically all of the story, right? And how they kind of reunite and what they're going to do, and it's just a surprise ending and things like that.
Right.
It's a simple indie film, you know.
Yes.
But it's playing on Amazon Prime UK and Amazon Prime in the States. It's not playing on Amazon here, but it's on Tubi. And it's on a few other places I can send you that people can actually watch it. I've got a website, asongforus.com.
So songforus?
.com.
Okay, I'll write that down. So I'll make sure I include that, songforus.com. Okay.
Oh, great, thank you. Flashing on the screen, right? You know.
Yes, yeah, for sure. It's good for people to actually see it. You know, one of the things is I listened to you talk about from you came and the things you got involved in. Like people, if they're just listening to it, it sounds like, oh, you just did boom, 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 boom. But it's not like that, right?
No.
A lot of it is a lot of hard work and time and setbacks, correct?
Yeah. Well, you know, first of all, the script writing is like, I don't normally write scripts, right? You know, so that took a long time.
Right.
And I went over it really carefully and stuff like that. But it was then we had to cast all the people. We had a casting agent to put it together. And we had a small crew of about 9 people, right? You know, there. We couldn't fit too many people in a little cottage, right? You know.
Yeah.
And it was a non-union, which is a shame. But what was wonderful about it gave everybody a chance to be in a film. And I think one of the leading ladies is now ACTRA, right? You know, and it I guess basically it was like 19 days shooting, and you know, we had logistical problems getting onto the island and the ferry and things like that, and the timing of everything, and all these people and managing them and then feeding them and you know, all of that, and you know, I sort of said 19 days and I stuck to it, and it seemed to work out okay.
Right.
And then when we came back to edit it, and I edited it here, and spent about a year basically editing it, color correcting it, doing the sound and everything, and then trying to find a distributor and how to market it. It was another problem. So I hadn't done all this, you know, because I was really a commercial filmmaker, and I'd done a lot of promotional work for corporations and for the Ontario government as well, and so. This is a whole new world for me, trying to get a film launched, right? You know,
right.
And so far, it's on all these other different channels, the streaming channels now. It's more that I list on my website. So, and it's sort of like it's sort of spreading, but you know, it's not for everybody. And a lot of people like horror, and I don't like horror at all. So
yeah,
I'm very grateful I was able to do it, but I think that's it for me. I've sort of, my film days are over now. You know, I could sit in a rocking chair. You know, I'm trying to relearn my guitar too.
Oh, very nice. Yeah. You know, I got to think that, like, I don't know, we're probably close to similar in age. And I'm thinking, you know, you go till you can't anymore. Whatever it is you're doing in life, you just keep going till you can't anymore.
That's right. Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's right. You just keep on doing it, and we just keep on renovating it. And we had twins, and now we've got they've got 2 grandkids each, and so that's another wonderful thing that's happened to us, right? You know.
Yeah, for sure. So now you're relearning the guitar as well. Not relearning; it's actually you've learned it, so you're practicing.
I remember it. Well, I remember the chords. But I didn't go that far, you know. So I've got it, but I've just been so busy trying to promote the film now, right? You know.
Yeah, for sure. So what else do you have like in mind for your next adventure, whatever that means?
Oh, jeepers! We're cleaning the house.
Well, that's always a wonderful adventure.
Yeah, I don't know whether we're going to do too much traveling. I want to do traveling. You know, we've done a bit, right? You know, but we're actually just sort of sitting quietly, trying to quieten ourselves down now, right? You know, and I might make another film. I don't know. You know, it's the big. yeah, I'm at this period in my life where I actually don't know what's coming next, you know.
Yeah.
But to stay healthy, right, you know, and stuff like that. And,
Not always easy, but yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
but it was nothing like a project, like a film, or even to write a book, right? You know, it's quite something.
Yeah, everything takes a lot of, as we get older, everything takes a lot more energy, or at least it feels that way, right?
Yeah. I just sort of noticed things that, you know, I'm starting to lose my memory a little bit, you know, like trying to remember Procol Harum and things like that, you know. I'm trying to get adjusted for that, right, you know. My son keeps on telling me I've got to go down and start exercising every morning, right, you know. And I'm not doing enough of that. So I've got to get fit again, you know, because, you know,
Right.
it is sitting in the editing room for a year. It's not exactly healthy, right? You know?
Yeah, no, I know, like I hate editing, so I don't. But I know that editing is very involved and very complicated and time consuming, as you said, you know. So yeah, kudos for that. Like, geez, I hate that. I used to have somebody edit my show, so now nothing's edited, it's all raw, you know, you get what you get, right?
Oh, well, actually, I love editing. It's kind of nice, you know, but editing a feature is so totally different than editing a short film or a documentary, right?
Right. Well, the editor I had for my show, like before COVID, you know, we had a team, like that. We had a 3-camera setup for interviews and stuff. She enjoyed it as well, and I'm thinking there's nothing enjoyable about it, but she'd rather be doing that than in front of the camera. Whereas I'd rather be in the camera than doing editing, you know.
Oh,
so we all find our place, right?
That's right. Yeah. Well, I sort of I've been to, you're in BC, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I've been into BC, and it's a couple of stories about going through the Rocky Mountains. When I was making my first feature film, which was called Trucking, I had it called Get On to Get Off. It was about the Festival Express train going across Canada.
Yeah.
And so I was negotiating for it, and I didn't get it, and so I decided just to follow behind and make the scenes behind the film.
Okay.
And we ended up in Calgary, and we were sleeping rough, you know, on Princess Island with our cameras and things like that. It was like a real low budget project. And we went into Banff, and there was a hippie bus. And it was one of those scenic buses.
Right.
We filmed all these hippies in a scenic bus going right across into Vancouver. And then there was a riot in Vancouver where people were pushing over a bus, I remember. It was quite a turbulent time back then.
Right. Yeah.
And another time we ended up, when we left LA, we went up the west coast and camped a bit with the kids, and then we went into Vancouver, and then we went up into it was the Pyramid Lake, was it, in the Rocky Mountains?
Pyramid Lake, I don't know.
And we camped up there, and I love the mountains.
Yeah, they're pretty beautiful. Yeah, I wasn't here in Vancouver at that time. You know, I'm from back east originally, so
where are you from?
Well, I was born in New Brunswick, and I grew up in Quebec, and I raised my children in Ontario, and then I came out here.
Oh wow! I've spent a few times up in New Brunswick with the armed forces, filming a DDH destroyer.
Okay.
Off the coast,
right?
And they got me to fly over because there was a Russian ship nearby, and it was a beautiful white dome ship that was a spy ship apparently, and it ended up on the national news. But I remember New Brunswick being a lovely, lots of trees, right? You know?
Yeah.
But I filmed a whole bunch of commercials up in St. John's.
Right.
I love Newfoundland a lot, right? And
yeah. I've never been to Newfoundland. I'd love to go there. Yeah.
Yeah. The people are just great, and of course Nova Scotia. I've done a fair number of films up in Nova Scotia.
Right.
It's wonderful to see all this country, and I spent a lot of time working for Natural Resources in Ontario, filming the parks and going all over
Oh, wow.
Northern Ontario.
Hmm.
You know, at that time we didn't have drones, so I had to be the guy with the helicopter flying out,
Oh, wow.
filming the countryside and things
Yeah.
like that. So yeah, so I had sort of like an interesting time. You know, it's sort of
Yes, it's you know, from somebody listening to it, it's like, wow, you know, all of these awesome experiences you've had. That's awesome. That is really wonderful.
yeah, and so it's sort of like yeah. I think you know you're out. You can get into places with a camera that where other people might not be able to get, or you do different things. But it's certainly been a wonderful life just shooting. I think I'm going to probably take up stills photography again.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
and do that. But yeah, I'm at this point in my life, and I'm sure a lot of people are, where you're trying to figure out, well, okay, well, what's next now? I've done this, I've done that, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
But I
really
think
good.
getting fit, and I did a fitness show for TVO called Fitness Over 40, and we shot it in Global Studios here, and so I'm just basically trying to remember what I learned in that show and start doing my exercises. But it had Billy Van starring in it. I don't know whether you remember Billy Van, but I did a whole bunch of educational shows. One I did on actually when video started to come out. I was sort of like basically out of work and not doing too much, and I pitched an idea to TVO about making videos, and all that whole video stuff was just coming on the market, right?
Right.
And so I made I think it was eight half-hour shows,
Okay.
and for them, and it ended up going on to PBS and playing in England and Spain. They made a Spanish version of this, right? You know? And that was my transition from filmmaking
Right.
to learning video. I was learning as I was going, and of course TVO. I mean, I was really a filmmaker. I cut film physically, right? And here we are writing down time code numbers to edit with, right?
Right.
and so there was a lot of really good experiences.
Yeah.
With throughout my life, trying to just figure out the technology. You know, as it's changing, it's still changing, right? You know,
Right. Still change. So that was Peter Hitchcock. I hit the wrong button, so I didn't get a proper send off, but just a little bit of glitch. But anyway, thank you for watching the show. I will include his website or his information so that you can find him and check out his independent film. Anyway, take care, everybody. Be nice, be happy, and peace out.
A sense of community, till the wax a place to be. A sense of community when you're free. Rolling through the mountains, rolling through the valley, rolling through paradise with me. It's multicultural, you're sure to see it all. Chilliwack's the place to be, you'll see. Come party in the park, go dancing after dark. Chilliwack's the place to be, you'll see.